Mr. Paavo Ruotsalainen, born in the town of Lapinlahti in eastern Finland in July 1777 and died in the town or city of Nilsiä in eastern Finland in January 1852, was a Finnish farmer and lay preacher. He became a born-again Christian at the age of 21 in 1799. He never received formal education in theology, but he managed to encapsulate and develop the central ideas of Lutheranism in response to the harsh northern environment and accelerating change of the society. His confessor and first spiritual father was Smith, Mr. Jaakko or Jakob Högman, in the central Finnish town of Laukaa, or actually Jyväskylä. He walked during the winter of 1799 over quite dangerous and harsh terrain, 200 kilometers to Jyväskylä. He illustrated to Mr. Ruotsalainen that there was one thing of utmost importance he was missing, the utmost spiritual poverty where only Christ could bring mercy. The core of Mr. Ruotsalainen's teaching was that in the spiritual life one can only be the receiver of God's mercy, never a subject. One must only abide and yearn for God to reveal himself. Ruotsalainen's thinking was a curious mixture of old folk wisdom, theology, and old Christian tradition. His thinking was fresh and original, but also vehement and harsh. He emphasized truthfulness and extreme introspection. In his opinion, it is better for a person under God's sight to admit the lack or even total absence of faith than to force a religious conviction. He strictly opposed and preached against hypocrisy where people pretend to be pious Christians despite not following Christ in their hearts. This was why he often, on purpose, behaved roughly and in an unchristian manner, joking coarsely, occasionally even swearing, drinking some alcohol during his long preaching trips and in the parties or feasts of that time and in the long weddings, and by smoking a pipe. He wanted to show that he was not a hypocrite. He believed that faith is a gift of God, although he also believed in the conscious reception of that faith. But he emphasized the need for people who wanted to become true followers of Christ, true disciples of Christ, to wait patiently for the moment when they could receive Christ as their Savior despite being big sinners. He became the leader of the revivalist movement called herännäisyys or awakening in Finland, although he was not the only leader, and although some other movements split from that movement. In the 1820s already the movement of people who pray frequently on their knees, led by the North Karelian priest Mr. Henrik Rehnqvist, who accused Ruotsalainen of apostasy and of sinning willfully and relying on cheap grace of God, or making God's precious grace a cheap excuse for intentional sinning. In the 1840s, the evangelical movement, emphasizing the right of people who wanted to belong to God and Christ to believe themselves saved on the basis of the Bible's promises without even feeling saved. And then there were a few others that broke away. It is estimated that he traveled 40,000 kilometers altogether, most of it on foot. With the spreading of the movement, both church and state authorities became worried about it. From 1838 to 1839, he and a few of the Pietist priests were found guilty of illegally organizing devotional meetings in private homes and were fined, and actually these priests were put on a forced leave of absence of 6 months from their jobs. He was severely sick in his last several years, and he died on his home farm in Nilsiä. In 1975 he became the subject of The Last Temptations, an opera composed by a famous 20th century Finnish composer, Mr. Joonas Kokkonen.